السادس العلمي المتميزين. Our lecture today, we will solve the exercises of 1-4. First question. Write the additive inverse for the following numbers, then represent these numbers and their additive numbers as argand shape. صيغة السؤال اكتب النظير الجمعي the additive inverse النظير الجمعي for the following numbers للأعداد التالية اللي راح يعطينا إياها. Then represent them ثم مثلهم represent مثل هذه الأعداد and their additive وكذلك النظائر إلها على شكل argand as argand shape على شكل argand. نعرف شنو يعني argand shape. We take it in the last lecture. Now number 1 Z1 يعني العدد المركب الأول equal 2 plus 3i. It is very easy to find the point which represent this complex number. So Z1 the complex number equal 2 plus 3i. So we can find the point which represent the number Z1 as order pair, and we can call it the Cartesian form. It will be the real part will be the x coordinate and the imaginary part will be the y coordinate. So now we can represent this is the complex number which given in the question, but he wants us to find the additive inverse for this complex number. So it will be negative. شنو الاديتيف inverse؟ الاديتيف inverse النظير الجمعي. شنو النظير الجمعي؟ نفس العدد بعكس الإشارة. نفس العدد بعكس الإشارة. So we will write it negative Z1 equal negative, and this is Z1 3i. So now we can multiply the sign with the two terms. So it will be negative 2 minus 3i. This is the additive inverse for the number Z1. So that means we can find the point which represent the additive inverse for Z1, and it will be, so the x coordinate will be the real part which is negative 2, and the imaginary part will be the y coordinate. So we write it as order pair, and now we can represent them in the coordinate plane. So we will draw the two x's. So the vertical axis and the horizontal axis. The horizontal axis will be x axis, and the horizontal axis will be y axis. And now we can write the numbers on it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we have negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, and in this side it will be the negative of y axis. So the two order pairs we want to represent are, this is the number which is given in the question, and this represents the additive inverse for it. So P of Z1, the point of Z1 will be 2, 3. 2 is the x coordinate, 3 is the y coordinate. So this point will be represent the point of Z1. And now we want to draw the argand shape. So we draw this vector. So let's represent the argand shape for the first complex number for Z1. And now we want to represent the argand shape for the additive inverse of Z1, the point of negative Z1, and its coordinates are minus -2, -3. So the x coordinate is -2 and the y coordinate is -3. So the point will be here. This is the point which represents negative Z1. So now we can draw the argand shape which represents a vector. So we see the representation of the complex number and its additive inverse will be in the same extension of line but in the opposite side. على نفس امتداد المستقيم اللي راح يكونون يعني تمثيل العدد المركب والنظير الجمعي له راح يكون على نفس امتداد المستقيم لكن بعكس الاتجاه. لاحظ اتجاه السهم، هذا الاديتيف انفيرس، بينما الكومبلكس نمبر الاصلي بهذا الاتجاه لكن على نفس الامتداد. وهذا ايضا راح تلمسوا اكثر لما ترسمون بالورقه، لانه راح يكون عندكم مسطره وكذلك او يعني اوراق بيانيه راح تكون واضحه بعد اكثر. تلاحظون انه على نفس الخط بنفس المسطره راح تكون على نفس الامتداد. So this is the representation of number 1, and now we will solve and represent number 2. So Z2 equal -1 plus 3i. That means Z2 equal -1 plus 3i. So that means the point which represents Z2 will be, the real part will be the x coordinate and the imaginary part will be the y coordinate. So this order pair represents the point which represents the first complex number, the second complex number. So the additive inverse for Z2 will be negative of the complex number, and it will be negative multiplied -1 will be +1, negative multiplied +3i will be -3i. So this complex number represents the additive inverse for Z2. So now we can write the point which represents the additive inverse for Z2, and it will be, the real part will be the x coordinate and the imaginary part will be the y coordinate. So now we can represent them on the in the coordinate plane. So we will draw it as this is the horizontal axis which represent x-axis, and the vertical axis which represent the y-axis. So, and now we can write the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and here -1, -2, -3. So here also. Now, the first order pair we want to represent it, which represents the point of Z2 is -1. So the x coordinate is -1. Here is the x coordinate, which is -1, and the y coordinate is +3. So the point will be here. This point represents Z2. And now we will draw the argand shape. ما ننسى نرسم شكل argand. ما ننسى نرسم السهم أو المتجه اللي يمثل شكل argand. So we can draw it. طبعا اعتذر لأنه بدون مسطرة، لكن دا أحاول إنه أخليه بالشكل المناسب أو الواضح. Now we want to represent the second order pair, which represents the point of negative Z2, which mean the additive inverse for Z2. The x coordinate is +1. Here it is. and the y coordinate is -3, so this is -3 and it will be here. So these points represent negative of z2, and now we will draw the argand shape which represents the vector OP. So we know the origin, it is the vector which is from the origin and to the point which represents the additive inverse for z2. And also we see that the argand shape for the additive inverse of z2 is there are in the same extension for the line, but they are in the opposite side. لكن بالاتجاهات المعاكسة راح يكون بنفس الامتداد للمستقيم لكن بالاتجاه المعاكس. So this is the representation of z2 and its additive inverse. And now we will solve section 3. z3 equal 1 minus I. So that's mean the point which represents z3 will be. We will write it as order pair. So the real part will be the x coordinate and the imaginary part will be the y coordinate. So this order pair represents the point of z3. And the additive inverse for z3 will be, the additive inverse for z3 will be negative multiplied 1 minus I. راح نضرب العدد المركب في سالب. And it will be, so we can simplify it. It will be negative 1 plus I. So that's mean its order pair will be the point of negative z3 will be, the order pair for this complex number will be the real part will be the y coordinate and the imaginary part will be the y coordinate. So now we can represent them in the coordinate plane. And we will see. We will draw the horizontal, the vertical axis and horizontal axis, which represent x-axis, and here is the y-axis. So we need the points positive 1 on the y-axis, and here negative 1 in the x, negative of x-axis, and here is negative 1 for the negative y-axis. So now we can represent the first point which represents the argand shape, which represents the point of z3 is positive 1, the x coordinate, and the y coordinate is negative 1. So now we will go in this way. So it will be positive 1, negative 1. Here is the first point which represents the z3. And now we want to represent the point which represents negative of z3, and it will be the x coordinate will be negative 1 here, and the y coordinate is positive 1, so it will be here. Here is the point. شوية عقلنا لأن هذه المسافة من الأكثر. Here is positive 1, so it will be this point represents point which represents negative z3. And now we will draw the argand shape. Here the argand shape, this is the origin. So that's mean the argand shape, we will connect between the origin and the point which represents z3. This is the first argand shape, the vector OP, and here is the argand shape for the complex number negative z3. Also we see that they are in the same extension of line, but they are on the opposite sides each other. This is the representation for section 3. And now we will solve and represent the complex number which is given in section 4. Z for the fourth complex number equal I. هنا مطيني فقط الجزء التخيلي. اكو بشي صعب؟ لا. معناته الجزء الحقيقي ايش قد؟ That means the real part equals 0. So it is very easy to find the point, the order pair which represent the point of Z4. And it will be, the real part will be the x coordinate. How much is the real part? واضح انه real part ما موجود. That means its value equal 0 معناته قيمته صفر. And the imaginary part will be the the y coordinate. What is the real part? The real part equals positive 1. This is the point which represents the complex number Z4. And now we want to find the additive inverse for Z4. النظير الجمعي ل Z4 will be. That means negative multiplied the complex number which is equal I. And it will be negative I. Because the real part equals 0. When we multiply 0 by negative 1, it's still 0. تمام؟ لأنه باعتبار الجزء الحقيقي هو هنا صفر. صفر من نضربه في سالب 1 يعني سالب راح يبقى صفر. إذن يبقى ما موجود. And that means, so now we can find the point. The point which represent negative of Z4 will be the real part equal 0 and the imaginary part will be the y-axis which equal negative 1. So now we can represent these two points. And we will draw the coordinates, the coordinate plane, the horizontal axis and the vertical axis. So we need the points 1, 2, it's enough, negative 1, negative 2. تلاحظون أباوع على الأرقام قبل ما أبدي أقسم المستوى الإحداثي. دائما دا أباوع على الأرقام اللي موجودة بالأوردر بيرز قبل ما أقسم المستوى الإحداثي. هنا أنا باوعت ما عندي أرقام غير بس أحتاج بين الواحد والسالب 1. فلذلك دا أخذ فقط يعني رقمين. بينما من أشوف إن هنا أكو أرقام كبيرة 4 5 6 يعني أخذ الأرقام بشكل أوسع. هنا ما راح أحتاج أكثر من الواحد بالسالب وبالموجب. Now the first point is which represents Z4 is 0 1. The x coordinate is 0. إحداثي x صفر راح أبقى هنا واقفة. And the y coordinate is positive 1. وين إحداثي y positive 1? This is the first point which represents Z4. And I want to draw the argand shape. So this is the origin, and that's mean the argand shape is we connect between the origin and the point which represent Z4. So this is the argand shape for the first complex number. And now we want to represent the argand shape for negative Z4. And its coordinates is, its order pair is 0. The x coordinate is 0. So I still here. And the y coordinate is negative 1. So this is negative 1. So that's mean the point 0. Negative 1 is the point which represents the negative of Z4. And now I want to draw the argand shape, so I connect between the origin and the point which represents Z4. So this will be the argand shape of the negative, the additive inverse for Z4. And also we see there are in the same extension of line but in the opposite sides. على نفس امتداد المستقيم. لكن بالاتجاهين المتعاكسين. So here we finished solving exercise 1. And now we will solve question 2. Question 2 says, write the conjugate number for each of the following. اكتب العدد المرافق for each of the following لكل ما يأتي. Then represent them ثم مثلهم along with conjugate as argand shape. يعني مثل العدد والمرافق له على شكل argand. So number 1, the first complex number is Z1 equal 5 plus 3i. This is the complex number. So the point which represents this complex number will be the point which represents Z1. We will write it as order pair, so that represents the Cartesian form. The real part will be the x coordinate and the imaginary part will be the y coordinate. So this is the point which represents Z1. And now we want to find the conjugate of Z1. So the conjugate of Z1 will be, we change the sign of the imaginary part only. نغير إشارة الجزء التخيلي فقط. بينما كنا بالاديتيف انفيرس قبل شوي بالسؤال السابق كنا نغير إشارة الجزء الحقيقي والتخيلي. لكن بالconjugate we change the sign of the imaginary part only. So the conjugate of Z1 will be 5 minus 3i. So that's mean the point which represents the conjugate of Z1 will be 5 negative 3. And now we can represent these 2 points in the coordinate plane. So it will be, we draw the vertical axis and the horizontal axis. So we can write the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And here is the negative of x-axis. And we will write the points on the y-axis. -1, -2, -3. Now, the first point, the first order where we want to represent it is the first. The x coordinate is 5 and the y coordinate is 3. So this is the point which represents Z1. So now we can draw the argand shape. This is the origin 0, 0. And now we connect between the origin and the point of Z1. So we get the argand shape which represents a vector of 0p of Z1. This is the argand shape for the complex number. Now we want to draw the argand shape for the conjugate of Z1, the point which represents the conjugate of Z1. So the point will be the the x coordinate is positive 5 and the y coordinate is negative 3. So here it will be the point which represents the conjugate of Z1. And now we can draw the argand shape by connecting between the origin and the point which represents the conjugate of Z1. And now we see that the argand shape which represents the conjugate of the complex number will be the reflection of the argand shape of the complex number, the reflection of it by the x-axis. راح يكون انعكاس يعني التمثيل البياني أو الارجان شيب للمرافق العدد راح يكون المعاكس إلى شلون انعكاس المرآة؟ الانعكاس إلى حول محور X، حول محور السينات، لكن نفس الطول لكن يكون بالاتجاه المعاكس إلى حول محور السينات. ليش؟ لأنه عندنا فقط الجزء التخيلي هو اللي تتغير إشارته، معناته فقط الإحداثي Y هو اللي تتغير الأماكن مالته، فدائما يكون انعكاسه حول محور X. دائما التمثيل البياني للconjugate will be the reflection of the complex number by the x-axis حول محور السينات. This is the representation of number 1. Now we will draw section 2. Z2 equal negative 3 plus 2i. This is the complex number in section 2, so we can write the Cartesian form for this complex number, which will be the point which represents Z2, and it will be the real part will be the x coordinate and the imaginary part will be the y coordinate. So now we want to find the conjugate of Z2. It will be the real part is still the same number, but we will change the sign of the imaginary part and it will be minus 2i. This is the conjugate of Z2. And now we want to write the point which represents the conjugate of Z2, and it will be the order pair. The real part will be the x coordinate and the imaginary part will be the y coordinate. So now we can present these 2 points. شو راح نمثل هذول النقطتين؟ So we draw the 2 axes, the horizontal and the vertical axis. X negative, X positive here, Y positive, and here is Y negative. And we راح أشوف النقاط اللي أحتاجها حتى أقسم. So it's 1 2 3 negative 1. راح نحتاج فقط بالاتجاه السالب للإكس. and here، بينما بالواي راح نحتاج فقط 2 والسالب 1 2 3 and here we negative 1 negative 2. So the first point negative 3 and positive 2. The x coordinate is negative 3 and the y coordinate is positive 2. So the point which represents Z2 will be here, the point which represents Z2. To draw the argand shape, we will connect between the origin, this is the origin 0 0, and we connect between the origin and the point which represents Z2. This is argand shape for this complex number. And now we will find the point which is the order pair negative 3, the x coordinate, and the y coordinate is negative 2. So the point which represents the conjugate of Z2 will be here, point which represents the conjugate of Z2. And now we connect between the origin and the point to find to draw the argand shape, which represents the vector 0p of Z2 conjugate. And also we see that the argand shape for the conjugate of the complex number will be the reflection of the argand shape which to the point of Z2 by x axis حول محور السينات. راح يكون انعكاس إلى حول محور السينات. This is the representation of section 2. And now we will solve section 3 of question 2. The complex number in section 3 is Z3 equal 1 minus I. So that's mean the point which represents Z3 will be the order pair. The real part will be the x coordinate and the imaginary part will be the y coordinate. So this is the Cartesian form for this complex number. And now we want to find the conjugate of Z3, which will be, we change only the sign of the imaginary part, and it will be 1 plus R. لما أريد أجد المرافق للعدد المركب Z3 نغير فقط إشارة الجزء التخيلي. Conjugate, we change only the sign of the imaginary part. So the point which represents the conjugate of Z3 will be the order here. The real part will be the x coordinate, and the imaginary part will be the y coordinate, which is positive 1. So now we can represent these 2 points in the coordinate plane. So we draw the 2 axes, the vertical axis and the horizontal axis. So we can put the points. We need only number 1. لاحظت من الأرقام إنه أحتاج فقط العدد 1. نقدر شوية نزيد من باب الترتيب، لكن فقط راح نحتاج العدد 1 بين السالب وبين الموجب. So the point which represents Z3 will be positive 1, negative 1. So the order pair positive 1, and that means the x coordinate is positive 1 and the y coordinate is negative 1. So this is a negative 1 in the y, on the y axis, and this is positive 1 on the x axis. So it will be, the point will be here, the point which represents Z3. And now we will draw the argand shape. So we connect between the origin يعني نقطة الصفر، راح نوصل بين نقطة الأصل والنقطة اللي تمثل complex number. So now this is the argand shape for the complex number Z3, and now we want to draw the argand shape for the point which represents the conjugate of Z3. The order pair is the x coordinate is positive 1 and the y coordinate also is positive 1. So this is the point which represents the conjugate of Z3. And now to draw the argand shape, we connect between the origin and the point which represents conjugate of Z3. So this is the argand shape for the conjugate of Z3. We see that the argand shape for the conjugate of Z3 is the reflection of the argand shape of the complex number on the x-axis. نلاحظ أنه التمثيل البياني أو الشكل أرجاند لمرافق العدد المركب Z3 راح يكون انعكاس إلى حول محور السينات. So here we finish the representation of section 3. Now we will go to the section 4 of question 2. Z4, the complex number Z4 equal negative 2i. That means the real part equal 0. So can we write the order pair for this complex number? Yes. The point which represents the complex number Z4 will be the x coordinate will be the real part which is 0, and the y coordinate will be the imaginary part which is negative 2. This is the order pair which represents the complex number Z4. And now we want to find the conjugate of Z4, which will be, we change only the sign of the imaginary part. حتى أجد المرافق نغير فقط إشارة الجزء التخيلي. So that means the sign of the imaginary part will be positive 2i. And the real part is 0 because we can't find it. That means its value equal 0. And now this is the complex number which represents the conjugate of Z4, which is positive 2i. So that means the real part equal 0. And now we can write the point which represents the conjugate of Z4 will be the x coordinate will be the real part, and the imaginary part will be the y coordinate. So we have the two order pairs. We can represent them in the coordinate plane. عندي نقطتين أزواج مرتبة اللي راح أمثلهم في المستوى الإحداثي to find the argand shape for each of the complex numbers Z4 and its conjugate. So we need the points 1, 2, negative 1, negative 2, positive 1, positive 2, negative 1, negative 2. لاحظت أنه أخذت فقط الحد العدد 2. بقية الأرقام اللي أحتاجها تتراوح بين سالب 2 وموجب 2 على محور الصادات. So the first point which represents the complex number Z4 will be 0. The x coordinate is 0. So I still here. بما أنه الإحداثي السيني الصفر إذا راح أبقى واقفة هنا. الإحداثي الصادي negative 2. So here is the point which represents Z4. So the argand shape will be, we connect between the origin and the point which represents Z4. So this is the argand shape for the complex number Z4. And now we will represent the second order pair which represent the point of conjugate of Z4. 0, the x coordinate is 0, so I still here. And the y coordinate is positive 2. Here is positive 2. So this is the point which represents the conjugate of Z4. And we connect between, to find the argand shape, we connect between the origin and the point of Z, conjugate of Z4. حتى أرسم شكل argand أوصل بين نقطة الأصل والنقطة اللي تمثل المرافق لZ4. So this is the argand shape for the conjugate and for the complex number Z4. We see that the representation of the conjugate of the complex number will be the reflection of it on on the x-axis. لاحظنا انه شكل argand لمرافق العدد راح يكون الانعكاس إلى على محور السينات on an x-axis. So this is the representation of section for question 2. And here we finished our lecture for today. See you in another lecture.